Hello, and welcome to The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. On this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places around the world. We want to foster positive, empowering conversations about how we experience aging with inspiring stories, perspectives, and opinions from our guests. We'll also look at how society, primarily Western society, views us as we age, and hopefully we can upend outdated and negative thinking with inspiring examples of those that are truly aging with abundance. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm pleased to be here with Reverend Beth Long-Higgins, who will also be your host on future episodes. So hello, Beth.
Hello, Mike.
So Beth, you lead the Ruth Frost Parker Center, whose mission really reflects the mission of this podcast. Can you tell us more about how the center, tell us more about the center and how it sees aging?
Yeah, the center was initiated in 2017 by United Church Homes. And originally, the goal was to have an annual symposium where we were taking a look at aging and related topics with thought leaders. And in the course of the past 6 years, we've expanded far beyond that. So today, what we say is that we seek to be a joyfully, spiritually vibrant, multicultural, multi-generational community of individuals and organizations who together are discovering the riches of abundant aging. That's kind of a part of our aspirational vision of what we're trying to do.
Well, what a feel-good mission. That's just so great.
Yeah, so I think that those adjectives there are really important. We see aging as natural and it's lifelong. And we hope that whatever stage of life they're in are finding how they're experiencing joy. So that's a part of being joyful. Spiritually vibrant, we recognize, and because we're a faith-inspired organization, pay attention to people's spiritual journeys. We know that in later life, sometimes people ask different questions or questions for the first time that have to do with the relationship to something greater than themselves. And so we aren't afraid to talk about those. And we don't have a prescription about what that journey should be or any path or method to that. Multi-generational, it's really important as you age abundantly to have relationships with people both older and younger than yourself and to see how you connect. Multicultural community is also really important in recognizing that the more diverse our engagement, the richer the blessings can be to all of those relationships. And we know that as individuals, it's important for us to reflect on our own aging process as well as to be aware of how organizations within our culture share narratives, whether those are false or more true to the research and the experience of others. And how do we look at those narratives and how do we shape and redefine those in a way that's beneficial for everyone?
Yeah, we've talked before about this, Beth, and I've really enjoyed our conversations on that subject. I mean, I think, one of the things that really struck me in learning more about you and how you've directed the work of the center is that there's always something to look forward to in aging, isn't there? There's always something that grows in aging. I mean, it's the richness of life, and also that who you are and what you hold dear to yourself doesn't sort of age out, right? I mean, it sort of carries you on this journey, right? It's something that to look forward to, maybe.
Yeah, and there's no particular age at which we've reached our peak or at which we stop growing or we stop maturing. We age until we take our last breath. And the general narrative in the larger culture is that you hit a certain age, whether that's 65 or 67 or whatever. And then it's downhill until you die. And that is not the experience of so many. That's not what research is showing us. And yet so many people assume that that's what happens, that they miss the opportunity and the permission to continue to grow and expand in their understanding and experiences.
Well, I think that you're going to get a lot of nodding heads as people listen to this podcast and agree with you on that. One other thing I would like to maybe explore with you on this episode is language. And you've taught me so much about just how words and ways of expressing things can really turn one's perspective around on aging. So, can you tell me about the word still?
Still, yeah. Dr. Bill Thomas talks about the tyranny of still. So when we use the word still in the aging process, what we're saying is that someone is doing something that somewhere along the way someone assumes they should not be doing based on age. And it's also comparing what you're doing. If I'm still riding a bike, well, that's also comparing what I'm doing now as opposed to what I had been doing in a previous stage of life. And yes, we change what we do, and there are things that we let go of as we age, but it's not because of our age per se. But it does have to do with other physical or even mental attributes that can come with age, and that age is a piece of it, but it's not because of the number of years of life that you've experienced.
It's almost like people set an artificial barrier in age. And they also, when these things happen, I can understand how, if your function changes and it changes what you're able to do, then that can just seem like a closed door. And hopefully, as we continue to explore the subject, we can inspire people to open related doors, or, find other ways of just kind of regaining that joy or rediscovering new things that bring joy in aging. It's very inspiring. Yeah. One of the other words that you've explored with me is the word support, and United Church Homes and what it does with community living and assisting folks that may have functional or other limitations, and to basically live in the place they choose for as long as they want. So tell me what support means in that context to you.
Yeah, I like the word empower better. And yes, we do need support throughout our entire lives in a variety of different ways. None of us is an island unto ourselves. We are interdependent, except in very few cases and severe situations. Everybody is in relationship. So even if you are an individual who is in need of someone to physically care for you, you're still in a relationship with them, and you still have things to offer them in that relationship. And so how do you participate in that relationship that encompasses caring for your physical needs, for instance? We don't ever check out of a relationship.
Great point. So when you think about this podcast series, I mean, we've talked a lot about the sorts of positions or things that we want to kind of bring light to. Is there anything that within the series that we haven't really chatted about yet, or things that you wanted to explore on the podcast that you think folks should know in this first episode of 2023?
Well, I look forward to talking to other thought leaders and other folks who have similar perspectives, because this is a lonely space to be in. You kind of feel like you're the only one, and you read about someone else or research here or there, but you kind of feel like you're a voice in an echo chamber. And it's nice to be in conversation and hear more than just your own voice coming back to you. So to be in conversation and to be a connector, that's a part of building the relationships and building the community. A big part of this has to do with ageism. Again, that's a part of the vision of us as an organization, and that really is about justice work and advocacy work. How can we conquer ageism? We are in the middle of the World Health Organization's Decade for Healthy Aging. They have launched an combating ageism campaign. And there are others around the globe who are working on this. But again, that we can bring people together who have similar perspectives, and we can share together and kind of build this network is going to be a great opportunity. And then finally, before I go on, I forgot, whenever we use the word ageism, we need to define it to make sure people know what that is. And that's how we think, feel, and act about somebody else based on how old we think they are. So it has to do with stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination.
Ageism can kind of go both ways, right?
Yep. I experienced significant ageism in my 20s. I was a young professional in a field predominantly occupied by men. I looked much younger than I was. And I experienced a lot of assumptions and people discrediting me because of how old they thought I was. So ageism can happen throughout the lifespan. And so our conversations about ageism can include all of that. And we also recognize that given where we are with United Church Homes and the focus of what we do, we are specifically lifting up the ageism that happens in later life.
Wow. So I'm just going to put a little plug in here for the podcast. I do it at the end, but I'm going to put it in now because what inspires me is this idea of building coalition and joining voices and finding voices in this space. So we would love and we encourage folks that share our thoughts or really just would like to share a perspective on what we're saying, whether you think it's right, whether you think it's wrong, please, come into conversation with us. And you can find that at the abundantagingpodcast.com. We also have unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker-Center. And if you're listening to this past June of 2023, hopefully our Abundant Aging resource site, abundantaging.org, will be up and running. So check that out. But these are all ways that you can get in touch with us and let us know what you think. So, Beth, one of the things that we've talked about on this show is asking our guests 3 questions about aging that we think will compel people's thinking and discussion. But I think we need to walk the walk. May I ask you these questions?
Please do.
Okay, question number 1. When you think about how you've aged, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
I really appreciate that a lot of my education is grounded in the cycle of having experience and then reflecting on that experience and taking what you need and then having an experience and reflecting it, and that kind of builds on each other. Mary Catherine Bateson talked about later life as being the stage of active wisdom. And that's what wisdom is experience, reflecting on that experience, and then learning from that. And so I think what has changed is, the accumulation of all the experiences I've had and the intentional reflection about it. And one of the things that I find interesting, there have been times when we've reached out to individuals who are later in life that we've wanted to speak at one of our events. And aging isn't necessarily their field of study, but we wanted to hear from them as individuals, our elders. And they were unwilling to do so. And it's because they have not done reflecting on their own aging process and aren't comfortable then reflecting on that in public.
Is that a good or bad thing, Beth?
It makes me sad for them. And it makes me sad for us because I think that we can learn from something from everyone. And the challenge about aging is we don't know how we're going to experience it because it's ahead of us. Whereas people who work with children, they were once children, they had children, they have some experience about what that was like. For people who work, with anybody younger than themselves, we have our own experience that can bias us one way or another. But for aging, the only way we can learn about aging is to be in relationship with people who are aging ahead of us. And so it makes me sad because I would like to learn from those individuals. But if they haven't done their own reflecting about that, it's going to limit what I can learn.
This just puts something into my mind here about, these examples, because if we look at aging in more of a macro sense, we see that, over the last 50 years, we've seen average life expectancy rise from, 60s, 70s, 80s. And so we're continuously, there's sort of like an en masse aging example, right? I mean, people who are the greatest generation, they didn't necessarily have a lot of examples of people that were aging to their 80s and 90s at scale. Now they're living it. And when we can learn from that experience, and certainly as, generational, the boomers, so they want what their parents had, those sorts of things. But it's almost that it's not just aging period, it's aging with abundance. This idea of aging in joy, aging in richness, aging, with vitality, and tapping into all these different emerging sources of vitality as one ages, right? So it's almost like, our experience, X number of years from now, hopefully we'll have, and this is, I guess, what we're trying to foster here with these shows, is just these examples, these touchstones for people to not only be inspired to age, but also to share their stories as they age.
Exactly. So, when we talk about abundant aging, in part, it's a nod to the fact that life expectancy has increased significantly. It's a nod to the fact that there are more people aging than ever before. And it's a nod to what you were just talking about, the depth of the experience and the richness of the experience. So yeah, one of the best workshops I attended the past year was a panel conversation with 3 retired gerontologists. They had all worked together at a university. And the panel conversation was asking them, okay, now that you yourselves are in your 70s and 80s and you are experiencing aging, what have you learned about all of those things that you taught for all those years about the aging process in your own experience? And it was really very interesting. And I just was so appreciative for them being so personal in a public way about that process. So yeah.
Okay, question number 2. What has surprised you the most about you as you've aged?
I think that I've become more myself. There's a thread through our lives and it continues and, it meanders and whatnot. But at every life stage, there have been different twists and turns. But as I look kind of retrospectively about my aging process up until this point, there's some very definite threads, and some of those have grown thicker and more secure. And it all leads to just building on the opportunity for me to explore the question, what gives my life meaning and purpose right now? What brings me joy? And what brings me joy today in my 6th decade of life is different than what brought me joy when I was 6. And that is absolutely okay, but it's also not disconnected. There's definitely a through line between them.
Yeah, so you're not losing what inspired you at age 6. In fact, it's a pathway to how you find joy now.
Yeah.
Okay, question 3. Is there someone that you've met or someone that's been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging, someone that inspires you to age abundantly from their example?
I cannot give you one person, Mike, because this is a part of most of my presentations. These are individuals that I've called aging heroes, but actually we're kind of changing that language a bit. And we're talking about these as who is my abundant aging influencers. And I'm just going to list 5. And just real briefly, first is my mom. And she is one of those persons that most people who know her are like, I want to be like Shirley when I'm whatever age she is at that moment. Her connection to other people is truly inspiring. And the second person is Eleanor. And the thing about Eleanor is that she and my mom were friends for over 60 years. It's not that they lived in the same town, but it was a friendship that actually grew in later life. And so together, the importance of friendships. And Eleanor, she in her latter years was living in an assisted living community that didn't have a whole lot of programming. So, she was in her late 80s and her daughters gave her an iPad and she learned how to use it. And she had friends who would bring in supplies and she knew the folks in her community and she would reach out and invite those folks who were able and interested. And they'd come into her room and she had a table there and she'd set up the iPad and they'd watch a YouTube video about how to paint a landscape. And they would sit there and paint. And they would watch a YouTube about how to do this, and they would sit there and do that together. Her creativity, up until she literally could not do it anymore, was truly inspirational. And then there's Jack, who kept on learning. He was attending a class at his church at the age of 95 and about process theology. And when I saw him coming out of the room one day, I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm doing great." And he had his armload of books. He said, "I don't really understand much about what this is about, but it really is very interesting." He was willing to, and it was being taught by a 24-year-old. He was willing to continue to learn about a subject he knew nothing about from somebody who was 70 years his junior. That truly is abundant aging to me. Marion is an individual who didn't let her past define her future. She is a woman who had a difficult life, several very difficult marriages. She addressed it. She acknowledged what those were like. She took what she needed from those experiences and she left them behind and she was able to move on in her life. And she really was able to experience a very significant relationship and a lot of joy and was a significant mentor for many people. And finally, Ruth is another individual who was just very vibrant. I mean, when she was 80. She decided she was leaving the home that she had built and moved into a community because she wanted to make that decision. She didn't want her kids to have to do that. When she was 92, she had a health incident, which sent her to the hospital for the first time. And in the hospital, she said, I'm going to have to go to rehab. Go ahead and get rid of my apartment, and I'm just going to remain in that skilled nursing home, which she did not need to do. While she was there, then she was the one who was going to everybody else's rooms and reading to them and checking on them and advocating for them. And when people would ask her, Ruth, what's the key to your vibrancy? And she also died when she was in her mid-90s. And she said, I learned a long time ago, it's really important to be friends with people who are younger than you are, because there aren't many of my contemporaries who are left. And if I hadn't developed that ability, I would be without anyone. And so Ruth is also one of my abundant aging influencers.
Well, I think we're going to continue to ask these questions of our guests. I think it's just so inspiring to hear these answers. And with that, we're actually going to wrap. We're going to wrap this first episode of 2023. So it's abundantagingpodcast.com. And so you'll get notified of new episodes as they come out. And we want to hear from you. What's changed about you as you've aged that you love? What has surprised you most? How do you define abundant aging? And who is your abundant aging hero? So again, that's abundantagingpodcast.com. You can also visit the Ruth Frost Parker website at unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker-Center. Again, if you're listening to this past June and July, hopefully abundantaging.org will be up. So please check us out there and please give us that feedback. Finally, very important, please keep Friday, October 6, 2023 on your calendar, when we will be hosting our annual Ruth Frost Parker Center Symposium. Join us live or virtually for a great day of sessions all around this year's topic, which is, Beth?
Dismantling agism, how stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination based on age affect us all. And October 6th is the day for the symposium. And October 7th, my friends, is Ageism Awareness Day, which is a national movement. And so connect with us either in person or online for the symposium and watch for other opportunities in your community to help us address and overcome the negative stereotypes about aging.
Awesome. Great. Well, great. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.